All right, guys. So we are now officially 1 year to the day removed from the October 7th Hamas attacks into southern Israel. Now, I think at the time, most people, including myself, believed that Israel's response was going to be incredibly brutal, but I don't think that most people would have guessed that we would see what we have seen over the last year. The levels of death and destruction in Gaza have just been unfathomable to me. But I do think that this has been probably hands down the most formative issue for me getting a better understanding of how my government works, how our media ecosystem works, and the levels of depravity that they are capable of. So I have some updates here for you guys. Coming out of Lebanon, coming out of Gaza, coming out of the potential escalation to a regional war with Iran, and the continued culpability and complicity that the Biden administration has throughout all of this. So let's go ahead and start it off here with Murtaza Hussein saying, "It's clear now, unless you're dense, that they just target civilian areas randomly as punishment. They even have a doctrine formally instructing this in Beirut. It's all American weapons, and every bit of this is on Biden." And he posts a video here that was put out by the Financial Times. We'll look a little bit more at this article here where they show some satellite images of the latest out of Lebanon, but these are just a couple of videos of the bombing of Lebanon and the aftermath of what that's looked like. You can see some of the craters there from some of these massive explosions, largely U.S. supplied bombs that are doing this destruction here. Now, in terms of what he was referencing here, the official doctrine of the Israeli military, this is what he's talking about. He's talking about the Dahiya Doctrine. And it's ironic, I guess, at this point that we've not only seen this deployed in Gaza, but also now being deployed in Lebanon again, right? Which is the place where the Dahiya Doctrine was originally formed. So a little bit more on that here. The doctrine that emerged out of the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah was most famously articulated by IDF commander Gadi Eisenkot, who said, quote, "We will wield disproportionate power against every village from which shots are fired on Israel and cause immense damage and destruction. From our perspective, these are military bases. This isn't a suggestion. This is a plan that has already been authorized." They say around the same time, former Israeli Colonel Gabriel Saboni wrote a report under the aegis of Tel Aviv University's Institute for National Security Studies that argued the necessary response to militant provocations from Lebanon, Syria, or Gaza were, quote, "disproportionate strikes that aim only secondarily to hit the enemy's capacity to launch rockets or other attacks. Rather, the goal should be to inflict lasting damage no matter the civilian consequences as a further deterrent." So, to summarize this, the Dahiya Doctrine is a formal standard of the IDF. And the standard is, when we feel as though we are under threat or under attack, we will use disproportionate force against civilians and against civilian infrastructure to try to apply pressure on the civilian population, right? The secondary means, as he pointed out there, is to potentially damage their military capabilities in the case of Hamas or in the case of Hezbollah. But the priority is to cause immense civilian suffering, to try to pressure the population against whatever enemy Israel is fighting against. So I think that should be pretty revealing in terms of understanding the, again, level of destruction of civilian infrastructure that we've seen not only in Gaza, but also now in Lebanon as well. So here's the Financial Times article where they give some images of how much bombing we've seen inside of Lebanon just over the last couple of weeks. I mean, they say 3,100 buildings across Lebanon have been struck in just 2 weeks. We have some images here of some of these recent strikes. This one back from September, this one from October, where you can see the aftermath of the strike. And then these red dots are areas where buildings were recently damaged. So in the last couple of weeks again, look at how many different strikes there are here. I mean, it seems like it escalates a little bit when you get down to southern Lebanon. But I mean, even here in the suburbs of Beirut, we've seen plenty of explosives going off. And this looks to me, I mean, I'm not a military expert, but this looks like white phosphorus to me. Wouldn't be the first time that Israel has used it. Probably won't be the last time, but that's an image as well from October 7th. Now, they also have further, videos like the one we just looked at and some before and after of some of the buildings and structures that have been taken down. But I want to move on because we got a lot to get into here. So, as posted by Mehdi Hassan, Further updates out of Lebanon. They're now saying that a quarter of the population of the entire country has been displaced. A quarter of the population. This is the equivalent, as he points out here, proportionately, if you adjust for population size, to 83 million Americans being displaced. This is more than the populations of New York, Texas, and California combined, the three largest states in this country, all displaced, driven from their homes by Israel, and backed by America. Now, we also have this here, as pointed out by UNICEF, that at least 100 children have already been killed in Lebanon in less than 2 weeks, just 11 days. Over 690 children have been injured in the last 6 weeks. UNICEF and partners are providing emergency medical supplies and essential services, and they have this link down below. We also have this. At least 28 on-duty medics have been killed in just a 24-hour period in Lebanon, according to the World Health Organization. So we have at least 100 children killed, close to 700 injured. We have 28 on-duty medics who have been killed in just one day, in a 24-hour period. And we also have at the same time the exact same rhetoric that we heard to justify the unjustifiable in terms of widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure in Gaza. They're now using the same fucking talking points for Lebanon as well. They say here, IDF posted this, saying that Hezbollah had a command center in a mosque next to a hospital, but Sky News has spoken to a surgeon from the hospital who said that's categorically untrue, and that they bombed both the mosque and the hospital with no Hezbollah positions or weapons in either. Sound familiar? Does this sound familiar to you guys? I mean, this is how Israel has justified bombing schools, mosques, churches, UN shelters, refugee camps, farmland, water infrastructure, residential buildings, everything you could possibly imagine has been bombed inside of Gaza. And every single time, it's the same justification. Well, there was Hamas militants there, or there was a command and control center underneath Al-Shifa that we can't provide you any evidence for, right? And remember when they posted that 3D rendering of what they said was underneath Al-Shifa Hospital, and it was this sprawling tunnel network that had bombs and explosives and weaponry and tech centers that Hamas was supposedly operating directly underneath the hospital? Whatever happened to that? You ever get any update to that? No? They're doing the same thing, by the way, now in Lebanon as well. Remember I showed you another 3D rendering where in the images they put out, it was literally as if they were trying to claim that in every single civilian house in Lebanon, these people are storing ballistic missiles. I mean, that's what they had, highlighted in red. Every single person in Lebanon has a ballistic missile in their garage. I mean, it's the same bullshit over and over and over again. Do they not get tired of this? I mean, you guys tell me, is the propaganda even supposed to be believable at this point? Or is this just for the sake of trying to give some sort of a narrative to Western governments? Is this just for the sake that Matthew Miller or Antony Blinken can get up on a podium and deflect from the intentional destruction of civilian infrastructure and civilian life? Is it just for the ability for our governments to, use this as some sort of a justification? Because to most of the world, I think to most reasonable people who have been keeping up with the last year of what Israel's done in Gaza, this shit should not be believable. They've been caught lying time and time and time again. Not to mention the plethora of other stories that we have as well of Israel explicitly targeting civilians, right? How about the countless testimonies that we have from doctors, American doctors, by the way, who have come out of Gaza and have basically all reported the same thing, which is that they see children on a near daily basis coming in with single sniper bullets to the head and to the chest. How does that happen? They're Hamas militants hiding directly behind the child, and they had no choice but to shoot through the child's head towards the Hamas militant? I mean, come on. Anybody who is buying in at face value to claims from the IDF that these kinds of attacks, that it's Hezbollah or Hamas responsible for them because they're using everybody in these places as human shields, anybody who buys that at face value is the most gullible man on earth, okay? It's a complete lie. They never provide any evidence for it. Now, we also have this. Dangerous statement by the Israeli military, which claims, again, without evidence, that ambulances are also being used to carry fighters and weapons. Again, the same thing that we heard in Gaza, right? This comes after more than 100 aid workers have been killed in Lebanon and more than 128 ambulances and civil defense cars were damaged in strikes. So 28 medical workers, 100 aid workers, as well as over 100 children have been killed so far, just in a couple weeks in Lebanon. I mean, again, the same shit we saw in Gaza. Remember the story of Hind Rajab? The car was shot up by hundreds of bullets. It was a 6-year-old child with some of her family members in the car. They were all killed. And then when the Palestinian Red Crescent tried to send out an ambulance to go and help Hind Rajab after she made that desperate pleading phone call to them, they sent an ambulance out, and then Israel killed the 2 medics who were trying to go and help her. Were they Hamas militants as well? Now, we also have some video here of some of the latest bombings coming out. This is in the southern suburbs of Beirut, live here on Al Jazeera. Look at the scale of some of these explosives, guys. Look at the scale of this. Now, I also saw another report that came out recently about the strike that killed Hassan Nasrallah, where they leveled multiple apartment buildings. And it blew my mind. Even with everything that we've seen, this still blew my mind. They reportedly used more of these like multi-thousand-pound bombs, bunker buster bombs, in just that one strike on those apartment buildings than the U.S. military used during the entirety of our 2003 invasion of Iraq. Think about that. In one strike, where they leveled half a city block, they used more of those 2,000-pound bombs than the U.S. used in the entire 2003 invasion of Iraq. I'm supposed to believe that this is proportionate self-defense, according to the U.S. Now, we also have this, I think predictably, given what we just read, that Lebanon hospitals are closing as Israeli strikes hit health facilities. Again, same thing we've seen in Gaza, the complete obliteration of the healthcare system, the education system. This is nothing new. They are attempting to do in Lebanon what they did in Gaza. We also have them, again, bombing what looks to be a mosque here in southern Lebanon. You can see them detonate it in this video here. Jesus Christ, I mean, massive firepower being used here. I don't know if that was a controlled demolition, like they went in and planted explosives. It's hard to tell, but could have been an airstrike there. Again, blowing up a mosque. How many dozens of mosques and churches have been destroyed by Israel over the last year? Now, we also have this in terms of the U.S. complicity in this. And it's really not even just complicity. It's more than that. It is an active participatory role in the sense that not only is Biden, like sitting back and pretending like he can't do anything to stop this, but his national security advisors and officials are openly encouraging this and view all of this as a good thing, right? So here we have this report from Politico. One of the quotes from it here is, behind the scenes, Hochstein and McGurk and other top U.S. national security officials are describing Israel's Lebanon operations as a history-defining moment, one that will reshape the Middle East for the better for years to come. Does this sound like something we've heard before? I mean, some of this is the same exact rhetoric that we heard from U.S. officials going into Iraq and Afghanistan. Oh, we're gonna build democracies, right? We're helping these people. We're not gonna destabilize the region, right? This is gonna be for the better. This is gonna produce stability for years to come. We're promoting freedom and democracy and human rights. Does this all sound like familiar rhetoric? It's the same shit. By the way, this guy McGurk helped to lead the United States into Iraq in the first place. He's a perfect case study of failing upwards within the U.S. military blob here in Washington, D.C. You can be a part of the most catastrophic mistakes in modern U.S. history, and you will still be put in these positions. Why in the fuck is this guy McGurk anywhere close to decision-making when it comes to the Middle East especially, but basically on anything else? This guy should not have a job in politics anymore, if you were to look at his record. But he is one of the most influential people in the Biden administration in terms of allowing Israel and actively encouraging them to escalate this, to invade Lebanon, to antagonize Iran. I mean, it's absolutely wild. To watch all of this happen, it's like it's a slow motion car crash that you could have prevented like 5 miles before you were going to rear end the car in front of you. And then every single time you just hit the accelerator. That's what U.S. foreign policy has been for the last year. While Biden, again, pretends as if, no, I'm against all of this. I'm for diplomacy, right? Now, we also have some images here from the Times on a comparison of what Gaza looked like before Israel began their offensive there and what it looks like now. So here we have this side by side. September of 2023, this is a satellite image of what Gaza looked like. You can see, some of the greenery here, some of the buildings. This is Gaza City up here. As you go further south, you enter Khan Yunis. Down here is Rafah. And just notice, these areas, these are obviously more densely populated areas, and this is more farmland here. But look at what the map looks like a year later. It's not an exaggeration to say that Gaza has been wiped from the map, utterly decimated. One of the most intense bombing campaigns in human history. Look at this. Look at this before and after. It no longer exists. It no longer exists. And this is coming at a time, by the way, where, remember, Israel, when they began their invasion into Gaza, they started up here in the north, right? And they tried to expel as many people as they could from Gaza City, from the north. They told them to go to the central Gaza. Then they told them, nope, we got to go there as well. Go southern, go to Khan Yunis. Then they said, whoops, we got to go into Khan Yunis. Now go to Rafah. Then they said, whoops, we got to go into Rafah. But they started up here in Gaza City, and they claimed, well, we've taken control of this, right? We got a handle on this. We're moving south because our operation is going so successfully, right? They're now saying that they want to do a total evacuation of Gaza City. Now, this is something that they're planning. A year into this genocide, they're basically threatening the people who remain in Gaza City, get out now, or it will be a closed-off military zone, and anybody who remains, even if you couldn't physically leave, right? Even if you're not in a position physically to leave and to go where, who knows where, right? But they're saying if you remain, then you're going to be treated like a militant. This is what's happening right now, a year later. This fantasy that Israel and U.S., commentators and U.S. politicians have been pushing, that Israel's going to wipe out Hamas, this was never a possibility, guys. This is why they're about to do this in North Gaza, is because they have not defeated Hamas. They haven't even defeated them up here in the north where they started all of this. Now, we also have further images here. This is a time-lapse starting back in October of 2023, going on month by month. The red areas, obviously, are where buildings have been struck and damaged. Keep in mind that, as you can see here from the percentage, a vast majority of the buildings in Gaza have been destroyed, right? They haven't destroyed a majority of Hamas, but they certainly destroyed a majority of the civilian buildings inside of Gaza. And notice how quickly it escalates immediately after October. October to November, you see it going from, a pretty significant escalation from September, but look at the difference here. October to November. By November or December, they had essentially destroyed the entirety of Gaza City, the main population center of Gaza. Now, we also have this. I want you to focus on this one down here at the bottom. This is the percentages of the amount of buildings that have been destroyed area by area inside of Gaza. So you have Gaza City, and you have North Gaza, you have the Gaza Strip in its entirety, you have Khan Yunis, but then all the way down here, you have Rafah. Keeping in mind, Biden said a major military operation into Rafah was one of his red lines. That's what he said was a red line. We still had the denial consistently from the U.S. that what Israel was doing in Rafah was not a major military operation. 46% of the buildings in Rafah have been destroyed. That's almost half. That's essentially half the buildings in Rafah, the very southern tip of Gaza, have been destroyed at this point. Some further images here, before and after. This looks like a nice area. This looks like, nice neighborhood, completely destroyed. Leveled to the ground. Even the roads have been dug up. Now, another one, this was a major university inside of Gaza. I covered this at the time, but look at the before and after here, man. This was a university building, and I remember this one specifically because this was a controlled demolition. This wasn't even an airstrike, I believe. So there were no Hamas militants inside of this building. We know that for a fact because it was a controlled demolition, meaning they had time to go into it after they had already pretty much destroyed it by this point, but they had time to go into it, to rig it with explosives, to back up, to take a drone shot video of it, and then to detonate the entire university building. What is the justification for this? What is the military justification for this? Further images that they have down here. Again, one more slider image. This is Al-Shifa and the surrounding complex. This was back in June of 2022, an overhead shot. And this is 2 years later, June of 2024. I mean, notice, guys, again, the roads have been dug up. It's not only the hospital complex that has been destroyed, it's the entire surrounding neighborhood that has been destroyed. Who can possibly justify this in their heads? This is not normal, guys. This is not normal. I mean, that's one of the main narratives that Israel likes to go with. Well, anybody would do it like this, right? Any modern military would respond in the way that we have. I don't believe that, actually. I don't believe that. Even with how brutal the U.S. has been, including in the Middle East and Afghanistan and Iraq, we didn't do this level of destruction this immediately, right? We did destroy a absolute metric fuck ton of civilian infrastructure, and we were responsible for the killing of hundreds of thousands of innocent people. We stayed there for 2 decades running, right? But I mean, look at this, guys. Just flattening an entire hospital complex and the entire neighborhood surrounding it, as well as the roads. I mean, it's just, again, it's unfathomable what we have allowed them to get away with. Now, again, it's not just we've allowed them to get away with it, but we've been actively approving all of this, right? So we had this reporting here from DropSite. I highly recommend you guys go and sign up. It's completely free to sign up for DropSite News if you want to get emails whenever they post new articles and stuff. Friend of the show, Ryan Grimm, started this outlet, and they do great reporting. So here's their latest. The IDF has killed as many aid workers as it has through a policy of striking any convoy it could claim was linked to Hamas. Now, do they ever provide evidence that it was Hamas? No, but they say that policy has been cited after every deadly attack on a convoy. Israeli cabinet members now say that Blinken approved that policy. So the Biden administration, at least according to the Israeli cabinet members, who would know, probably, unless they're just completely lying about this, but it seems like something Blinken would do, they're saying that he approved Israeli strikes on aid convoys. This is the same Antony Blinken, who I covered in a recent video a few days back, who rejected several reports from his own agencies that said definitively that the weapons we're sending to Israel are illegal under U.S. law because they are blocking our humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza. He threw away those reports, went to Congress, and lied about it, lied in front of the entire country to justify continuing to send weapons to Israel. Weapons which he then is reportedly approving be used against aid workers, be used to blow up aid convoys. I mean, it's unreal. It's unreal to witness all of this happen in real time. Now, we also have this here in terms of the escalation to war with Iran. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich is saying that the war will not end until Israel topples the Iranian government and ends its nuclear program. So we went from, we have to take out Hamas, to now we have to take out the Houthis, to now we have to take out Hezbollah, to now we have to take out the Iranian government. Now, do you guys think that Israeli ministers like Smotrich would be making promises like this if they did not believe that the United States was going to have their back throughout this entire process? No, of course not. I don't believe that Israeli officials believe they can single-handedly fight a war with Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran all at the same time. They don't believe that. What they believe is that Biden has such an ideological commitment to Zionism, right, and such a disregard for Arab life that he would be willing to help them, regardless of what they do. And he's demonstrated that over the last year, that, yeah, he is willing to help them, regardless of what they do. One final embarrassment here to finish off the video, because the Biden administration is reportedly promising to give Israel compensation if it hits acceptable targets in Iran. So keep in mind, the reason that Iran launched 180 some odd ballistic missiles towards Israeli military facilities, the reason they did that was in response to Israel assassinating a foreign official, Ismail Haniyeh, on Iranian soil. So they did that in response to that. By the way, still, as far as what I've seen, 0 people were even killed in that attack by Iran. Israel turns around and they're now saying we have to escalate this further, right? Iran, when they launched that attack, they essentially came out and said, this is our response. We don't want this to escalate further, but if you attack us in response to this, then we're going to continue up the escalation ladder. Now, the Biden administration could have stepped in and they could have pressured Israel and said, we're not going to fight a war with Iran, okay? No matter what you do, we're not going to get ourselves involved in that. So you're on your own, right? And in fact, we're going to follow international law and U.S. law and start cutting off the weapons to you if you continue to escalate. That's what the Biden administration could and should have done. But instead, the U.S. is using the carrot approach and saying, we will compensate you with weapons, with financial support, if you don't get us into World War III immediately. That's essentially the Biden policy here. If you somewhat limit your escalation with Iran, then we'll give you a little treat on the side. We're using the carrot approach when we need the biggest fucking club of all time, okay? This is not a situation to be promising compensation packages for Israel. We're months and months and months removed from when we should have cut off all of the weapons to Israel, right? Instead, we're promising them more if they just limit their escalation with Iran. It doesn't get more humiliating than this. I mean, at the same time that a few days ago I covered that reporting that Biden, behind the scenes, he knows full well that Netanyahu wants him to lose this election, right? Netanyahu wants Trump to come back into office because Trump, even though Biden has been giving Netanyahu essentially everything that he wants, Biden still has that angle of pretending to care about Palestinians, right? Pretending to care about civilians, right? And pretending to, I'm trying to restrict Israel from being too aggressive. Netanyahu knows that Trump won't even do that bullshit act. If anything, Trump will encourage him, right? Trump doesn't give a single solitary shit about Palestinian life or the lives in Lebanon or in Iran. In fact, I just saw a clip the other day, and I'll probably have a video on this tomorrow, both from Trump and Waltz and several other people as well. But Trump, a couple days ago, outright encouraged Israel to attack Iran. So Biden knows that Benjamin Netanyahu wants Democrats to lose this election. And he's still going along with this. So it's like, not only are you wrong morally, obviously, not only are you wrong legally, because it's illegal for you to continue sending them weapons, but you're also wrong politically, right? This is a massive detriment to Kamala Harris's chances of winning in November. We're just a month out from this election, by the way. I mean, it's unbelievable that we're still on this trajectory. Kamala, by the way, had a huge opportunity to break from the Biden administration, right? She could have made promises. She could have said, this has to end. Instead, she's going along with the exact same policy as Biden is. So, I mean, it's all pathetic. At the same time, it's all terrifying. And, I mean, as of right now, I wish I could give you guys good news, but it really does seem like there's no end in sight to this. We're no closer. In fact, I would say we're farther away from a potential ceasefire in Gaza than we've ever been. We're farther away from a potential ceasefire in Lebanon than we've ever been. In fact, that's escalating further as we speak. And we're probably closer to getting into a war with Iran than we have in years, maybe even decades. So again, absolutely terrifying. And as a reminder, all of this was preventable. Every single step.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying